say love, it is a hunger and endless aching need. I say love, it is a flower, and you, it's only seed. It's the heart afraid of breaking that never learns to dance. It's the dream afraid of waking that never takes a chance. It's the one who won't be taken, who cannot seem to give. And the soul afraid of dying that never learns to live. When the night has been too lonely and the road has been too long, and you think love is only for the lucky and the strong, just remember in the winter, far beneath the bitter snows lies a seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes the rose.
Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and serve the community. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. We welcome all of you. It is good to be together this morning. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. At the top of our online service, we want to invite you to please remain muted through the service. When too many voices sing or speak together, it can create a cacophony of voices on our audio, which can disturb the flow of worship. As we gather this morning, we want to invite you to pop into the chat and offer a greeting. You can find this at the top or the bottom of the screen with an icon of a text bubble and the word chat. So please pop on over and offer a greeting. It could be a wave or a hello, I'm here, or whatever you prefer. Welcome to First Universalist this morning. And now let us join our hearts and voices in singing together this morning. recognizing even as we are singing muted in our own home, we are creating a song across our city of Rochester and the country. Let us sing together hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit.
Everyone, it's good to see you all. These words are from an anonymous source. We, the bearers of the dream, affirm that a new vision of hope is emerging. We pledge to work for that community in which justice will be actively present. We affirm that there is struggle yet ahead, yet we know that in the struggle is the hope for the future. We affirm that we are co-creators of the future, not passive pawns, and we stand united in affirmation of our hope and vision of a just and inclusive society. We affirm the unity of all persons. We affirm brotherhood and sisterhood that allows us to touch upon each other's humanity. We affirm a unity that opens our eyes, ears, and hearts to see the different but common forms of oppression, suffering, and pain. Yet we are one in spirit, and we celebrate our hopes for human unity within ourselves and within the gathered community. We will discover the strength not to hide in indifference. Affirming that hope, publicly expressed, energizes and enables us to move forward. Together we pledge action to transcend barriers, be they racial, political, economic, social, or religious. We pledge to make our tomorrows become our todays. Come, let us worship together. Please join me now as we light our flaming chalice, the symbol of our liberal faith. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join me now as we recite our affirmation of faith and sing the doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church, The quest for truth is its sacrament and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to them that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. Each week, we lift up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering for the ministries of this church. We dedicate these gifts freely given and gratefully received to the work of this congregation, building honest, caring relationships across all lines of difference, growing in spirit and searching for meaning together and apart, promoting religious freedom, practicing compassion, and working for justice. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Please copy and paste the link in the chat to give online to the First Universalist Church, or feel free to send a check to the church.
There are secrets on a leaf, in the water, in the air, hidden planets, tiny worlds, all invisible. Not a person seems to know, not a person seems to care. There is no one who believes a thing I say. Well, I'm fairly certain at one time or other, great thinkers all feel this way. I'm alone in the universe, so alone in the universe. I found magic, but they don't see it. They all call me a lunatic. Okay, call me a lunatic. If I stand on my own, so be it. 'Cause I have wings, yes, I can fly around the moon and far beyond the sky. And one day soon, I know there will be one small voice in the universe, one true friend in the universe, who believes in me. I'm alone in the universe, so alone in the universe. My own planets and stars are glowing. No one notices anything, not one person is listening. They don't any way of knowing that I have wings. Yes, I can fly around the moon and far beyond the sky. Well, someday soon you will hear my plea. One small voice in the universe, one true friend in the universe. Please believe in me. Alone in the universe. Nobody knows that I have wings and I can fly around the moon and far beyond the sky. You call my name and you set me free. One small voice in the universe, one true friend in the universe. Who believes in me?
I invite you into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered place. As we place stones into the jar, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community if they are typed into the chat box. All are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat that we may hear from the community gathered here. Actually, I think what we will do is we will just silently honor what we read in the chat. And we drop one final stone in the bowl to represent all of the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held together in this heart of love. I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. May I move gently through this cloudy, murky gray day. May I remember that this is just one day and that showing up is at least half of what is asked of me. May I set aside my underlying anxiety that I will not get to everything and put my trust and faith into the riverbank of the human community. We are working together. I am not alone. There is love holding me that is unconcerned with my day's to-do list and more concerned with my spirit's survival, even its thriving in the beautiful, challenging world. May we all remember that Rome wasn't built in a day and that our efforts are part of an ongoing stream of efforts of lives being lived beside one another, shoring up this world. May what little I do today be for the greater good. May I be gentle with others today as I long for others to be gentle with me. Let us now, in a spirit of contemplation, sing together hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Have you ever had this experience? You are with a group of friends, perhaps on a hike through the woods, and someone spots a woodpecker or an owl, and then someone else alerts the group, almost as if by instinct. Everyone in the group immediately sees it too. Everyone except you. I don't see it, you say, feeling lost and left out. Surely your life will be forever impoverished if you too can't share in this remarkable moment. It's right there, between those two trees, someone helpfully offers. But that isn't enough. You still don't see. Hating to spoil everyone else's reverie, but beginning to succumb to a mild panic at being so out of step with everyone else, you say with frustration, I still don't see it. Less patiently now, another friend chimes in. Look, see the telephone pole? And relieved that, yes, you can finally see something that is being pointed out, you say, yes, I see it. Okay, so follow the telephone pole down to the top of the spruce tree and then look just to the right. See him? You don't. But by now you realize that you probably won't see him. And you also sense that the patience of your friend has reached its limit. And so you just say, oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Now, thank you. Thank you. And as the other people in your group all commune over this shared sighting of a tiny miracle, you stand apart and excluded, feeling out of step and hopelessly lacking, as if you alone are deficient in some fundamental way. My friend Martha has always called these on the outside looking in moments. These times when we feel as if the world around us is a play in which everyone else is on the stage and we are in the audience alone. As if those around us are resonating with a sound we can't quite hear, or seeing a star that is obscured by a tiny cloud that hovers over only us. In these moments, we feel as if we are the only ones doomed to this fate. But take heart, my friends, because it only seems that way. For just as we sometimes fail to spot the woodpecker, we often miss those times when it's someone else's turn to be the misfit. The human mind can be a lonely place, and it can often trick us into believing that we are much more solitary than we really are.
It's not that easy being green, having to spend each day the color of the leaves, when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow or gold, or something much more colorful like that. It's not easy being green. It seems you blend in with so many other ordinary things, and people tend to pass you over, 'cause you're not standing out like flashy sparkles in the water or stars in the sky. But green is the color of spring, and green can be cool and friendly like, and green can be big like an ocean, or important like a mountain, tall like a tree. When green is all there is to be, it could make you wonder why. But why wonder? Why wonder? I'm green and it'll do fine. It's beautiful, and I think it's what I want to be.
I placed the chalice here so that people could see it during the service, and the flame is quite tiny, but it is still burning. Reminds me a little bit of when they tell you on the plane that even though the bag does not fully inflate, oxygen is still flowing to the mask. The chalice is still lit. I have spoken many times of my years in Catholic school, and like so many of us, I have my share of colorful stories to tell about my 8 years at Blessed Trinity School in Auburn. Blessed Trinity School was provided over by a charismatic, larger-than-life sister of St. Joseph, Sister Walter Ann O'Malley. Sister was theatrical and could be quite dramatic when the occasion called for it. She had actually wanted to be an actress, but instead she found herself called to be a nun. She was a charismatic and compelling person who commanded a room simply by her presence in it. When Sister Walter Ann spoke, we listened. And yes, we listened partly out of fear. She was a force to be reckoned with, but we listened more because she had a way of speaking that drew us in and made us want to hear what she had to say. She often addressed the entire school at once over the public address system, but these were not your standard dry school announcements that most of us are used to hearing. Sister's announcements were more like productions, Blessed Trinity's own version of the fireside chat. There was a theme, a lesson, and usually a rather melodramatic story which illustrated the lesson she hoped that we would absorb. Like the story about the girl who lost her eye when a snowball was thrown at her. And this story was repeated annually on the day of the first snowstorm. And then she would usually update us on Bishop Casey, who was, it always seemed, in the very frailest of health. And boys and girls, she'd say, I know you have all been keeping Bishop Casey in your prayers, and I know you are all anxious to hear how he is, so I won't keep you waiting any longer. And there would be a dramatic pause. And then the tone of her voice would soften and grow just a tad trembly. I am afraid the news isn't good. I'm sorry to have to tell you that I learned only this morning that our dear Bishop Casey is again in the hospital. And boys and girls, I know you will be very upset to hear this, but his doctors are quite worried. Bishop Casey wanted me to tell all of you that he is thinking of you and he can feel your prayers. He can't wait for the day when he may visit us here. He isn't eating much, but his spirits are good. And Sister Joseph Francis and I will be visiting him this weekend. I know all of you will be worrying, so I promise to update you on Monday as soon as Sister and I are back in Auburn. And now, let us take a moment to think of our dear, dear Bishop Casey as we pray for him. And then her prayer would say something like, oh, Heavenly Father, we ask that you protect our dear Bishop Casey, and we ask, Heavenly Father, if it is your will, to restore Bishop Casey to health. And then this would be followed by some Hail Marys and perhaps the Lord's Prayer. And then Sister would sign off wistfully, my dear students and faculty, please continue to keep Bishop Casey in your prayers. Then there would be a long silent pause before Sister softly said, thank you. And then she would turn off the switch to the loudspeaker. Usually we would sit in silence for about 10 seconds or so after this before moving on. It just seemed necessary to honor what we had just heard. Sometimes our teacher, especially if she was one of the other nuns, would also take a moment to add her own wishes for Bishop Casey, usually assuring us that our prayers would be heard and that Bishop Casey just might be able to visit Blessed Trinity one day after all. I have to confess, I always found these Bishop Casey updates a little unsettling and guilt-producing. I was unsettled because I seemed to be the only person at Blessed Trinity School who wasn't worried about Bishop Casey. In fact, I seemed to be the only person who didn't know Bishop Casey. What was even worse, not only did I not know Bishop Casey, I didn't even know who Bishop Casey was. He was not the current Bishop of Rochester. I knew that much. That was Bishop Hogan. So who was Bishop Casey? While everyone around me was praying and fretting over this beloved man, I alone seemed to be completely out of sync, the only member of the community not encircled in Bishop Casey's love. And while I certainly didn't wish him any ill, I had to confess, at least in the solitude of my own soul, that I wasn't particularly worried about him either. In fact, I rarely ever thought about Bishop Casey unless Sister brought him up over the loudspeaker. Here, all of my classmates were praying and worrying and struggling at times, it seemed, to get through the weekend until Monday, when they would hear news of Bishop Casey's health. And I went weeks at a time without Bishop Casey even crossing my mind. There must truly be something very wrong with me to be so out of step with this community that I was ostensibly a part of. How could I possibly not know Bishop Casey? What had I missed? What bond had been established between this man and all of my classmates that had somehow eluded me? And what else had I missed out on? Because I definitely got the sense that Bishop Casey was just the tip of the iceberg. There was often a sense that I had, that my peers were in on things that I wasn't. They often seemed to all be sharing some kind of a secret that excluded just me. I'm sure it goes without saying that I never dared to ask anyone who Bishop Casey was. I could never take the risk of betraying myself that way. Things were already bad enough. Me being the only person left out of this fraternal society. What would people think if they knew that I didn't even know who Bishop Casey was? So I listened with rapt attention to Sister's Bishop Casey reports, feeling a sense of vicarious relief when Sister brought news of his having had the strength to sit up and drink his tea, or finding the energy to bless a set of rosary beads for her while she had visited. Convinced in my mind and heart that everyone around me, everyone else but me, was rejoicing inside, all of them able to picture in their minds this cherished icon whose well-being mattered so very deeply to them. What love and connection I was missing out on, being the only student in my class not encircled in this care of love and concern. And yet, there was also a part of me that sometimes couldn't help wondering just exactly how everyone else in my class had come to know and love Bishop Casey. Just where exactly had they met him? What gatherings and activities had they all managed to be a part of while my back was turned? How could I possibly have missed this much? Well, I'm sure all of us here this morning have lived long enough that the answer is already obvious. The other kids in my class didn't know Bishop Casey. They didn't know Bishop Casey any more than I did. How could they have? Sister Walter Ann never ever explained to us who he was. One day she just began praying for him and speaking of him as if we knew him as well as she did. And like me, my classmates were caught up in the vivid way that Sister described him and the obvious love and respect that she had for him. And if any of them had wondered who Bishop Casey was, none of them would have voiced it out loud for the same reasons that I never did. After all, who wants to be the only person at Blessed Trinity School who doesn't love Bishop Casey? On the outside, looking in, how many of us have not, at some point, perhaps at many points, felt this way. Times when we feel completely out of step with those around us, as if there were some secret that was being kept from us alone, as if everyone is in on the joke but us, as if everyone else somehow manages to know and love Bishop Casey but us. Times when we feel isolated from and excluded from those who are closest to us, not necessarily in an overt way, just somehow separate in some subtle, hard to put a finger on kind of way. Times when it feels as if no one completely understands or totally relates. And at these times, it not only seems that we are out of sync with the rest of the world, but it feels that we are the only ones who ever experience this. So why? Why do we feel this way? Why, even when we are surrounded by people and having shared experiences with them, do we sometimes feel separate and isolated and alone? It's the human mind that causes us to feel this. Because no matter how much time we may spend with others, and no matter how many experiences we may have in common with them, no one else inhabits our mind with us. No one but us can experience our minds from the inside. The human mind is perhaps the loneliest place in the world. And it is not, by the way, always a reliable interpreter of what goes on outside of it. This is why three people can have the exact same experience, and then all of them will tell a different story about that experience. When Sister Walter Ann was speaking to us about Bishop Casey, my mind just automatically made the assumption that everyone else knew and loved Bishop Casey. And once I had made that leap, I never questioned this basic premise again. I simply lived as if it were true. And because of this, I continued to feel excluded and isolated and alone. We are all led astray on a daily basis by the working of our own minds. Minds which are naturally myopic and inherently insular. Minds which interpret the world around us and then tell us stories which we never think to fact check or to subject to any level of scrutiny. In fact, if you think about it, most of the time, the inner workings of our minds is reality itself for us. On the outside looking in is actually backwards. In reality, we are actually always all on the inside looking out. And what we see is filtered through the subjectiveness of the inside, through assumptions and judgments and fears, through memory and experience and pain. And quite the opposite from the way it seems, in this sense anyway, there really is no shared community, no inner circle that we're being left out of, no common inside that we are the only ones standing outside of. Instead, our world is actually made up of over 7 billion insides and no outside at all. 7 billion isolated, solitary, solipsistic minds, each interpreting the world through assumptions and judgments and fears and memory, through experience and pain, each mind simultaneously convinced that it is both the sole arbiter of reality and its own discrete outpost, separated from the totality of the collective consciousness, which seems at times to unite everyone else, everyone but us. To navigate the world with grace and compassion, we must nurture an awareness of how our minds actually work and begin to appreciate the limits of what our minds can interpret for us. And we must hold an awareness that everyone else around us is similarly confined by the limits of their own minds. We must always remember to challenge our assumptions and to seek clarity. to extend charity and goodwill and the benefit of the doubt to others, and also to ourselves. The world is populated by isolated, lonely, fragile people, over 7 billion of us. It's the human condition. Each of us perpetually bumping up against each other's fears and assumptions and prejudices with our own fears and assumptions and prejudices. Each of us ultimately self-contained in the cocoon of our own dear, familiar, private, solitary minds. We are all on the inside looking out. Perhaps now more than ever, as we live life from the seclusion of our homes through computers and telephones, it is probably easier than ever right now to feel that we are on the outside looking in at life. But take heart, my friends, because this feeling is just our experience of the limits of our own minds. When I was taking creative writing classes at SUNY Brockport, my favorite professor, Judith Kitchen, used to remind us on a regular basis that other people's writing, when we heard it read, when we were workshopping it around the table, would always seem better to us than our own. Other people's ideas will seem fresher, more unique, more innovative, and more creative. It will seem this way to you simply because you didn't think of it, she used to tell us. Our minds impose all sorts of limits upon us, limits which can, unless we recognize them, isolate us from connection, inoculate us from challenges, and inure us to injustice. A truly free and responsible search for truth and meaning, one that is completely responsible, can only be conducted by a mind that is ever more aware of its own limitations. Its judgments, its assumptions, its fears, its prejudices, its faults, and its fantasies. May we all seize this opportunity right now that our imposed solitude has given us to cultivate an awareness of the limits of our mind. Our spiritual lives will be richer, our relationships will be deeper, and the world will be more just if we engage in this work with true integrity and boundless goodwill. A few years ago, I attended the 35th reunion of my Blessed Trinity 8th grade class. Larger than life, Sister Walter Ann was there, not physically in person, but definitely in the memories and in the retelling of the stories. I was asked to be one of the MCs of the evening. And when I was addressing the group, I retold Sister's annual story of the girl whose eye was completely knocked out by a snowball. Everybody remembered this, and we all had fun reliving the horror we felt the first time we heard the story. And then, finally, after 35 years, I did it. I took the leap. I brought up Bishop Casey, and I confessed publicly on that stage in front of all of those people that I had a fear that I was the only person who didn't know who he was. Did anybody know who Bishop Casey was? I asked my audience. As it turned out, only Chris Welch did, but that made sense because Chris had become a priest. I invite you now to join together as we sing number 159, This Is My Song. We extinguish this flame, but keep its light in our hearts when its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Though we cannot be seated next to one another, we are still connected in this community. As we come to a time of close of our service, I want to invite you into an embodied practice of holding hands from a distance at the end of our service. If you are joining us by video, change your view to gallery view rather than speaker view. Then reach your hands out to the edge of the screen and bring to mind someone you love from this congregation. We walk this earth but a brief moment in time. Amid our suffering and pain, however great or small, let us continue to learn how to celebrate. Let us continue to grow in our capacity to love ourselves and each other, and let us continue to move toward the goal of a just community. Go this day in a renewed spirit of peace and hope, and with the wisdom to greet the new week. And let the people of this church say together, Amen. As we come to the close of our service, I invite you to follow the benediction with the words, I will cultivate my mind. Please join us together in typing those words into the chat together.
When the sky is a bright canary yellow, I forget every cloud I've ever seen. So they call me a cockeyed optimist, immature and incurably green. I have heard people rant and rave and bellow that we're done and we might as well be dead. But I'm only a cockeyed optimist, and I can't get it into my head. I hear the human race is falling on its face and hasn't very far to go. But every whippoorwill is selling me a bill and telling me it just ain't so. I could say life is just a bowl of jello and appear more intelligent and smart, but I'm stuck like a dope with a thing called hope, and I can't get it out of my heart. Not this heart. I hear the human race is falling on its face and hasn't very far to go. But every whippoorwill is selling me a bill and telling me it's just not so. I could say life is just a bowl of jello and appear more intelligent and smart, but I'm stuck like a dope with a thing called hope, and